There we go. Welcome to Quarkus Insights number 48. And we got guests this time. I'll introduce you in 2 seconds. We just cover a few news that comes out. So this week we had the Quarkus Alpha 2. Alpha 2 out. For those who don't know, we've done monthly releases of Quarkus the last year and a half, and we plan to do so. But because we wanted to do a few changes around how we use Vertex or upgrade to Meta version of Vertex, we wanted to do a 2.0. And one of the big features in there is continuous testing, which we'll talk about today. And I'll just say, and I've said it the last 3 insights I've been on, that just be aware that one thing that we do change in Quarkus 2 is that we are no longer supporting Java 11. So if you want to use
Java 8.
Oh, sorry.
We still support Java 11.
Yes. Oh, sorry. We moved to Java 22 now. No. Java 8 has been dropped. So if you want to use Java 8, you will be on Quarkus 1.13, I guess it's it. But so far we haven't had anything bad about it. So yeah, just be aware for those that Java 8 has been dropped for Quarkus 2. Another thing so I wasn't on the call last week was about the Keycloak, but there's a news thing there that might be interesting for you guys to know that we had Summit like 2 weeks ago, and there we announced this service called OpenShift Streams, which is like a Kafka service, and that one actually used Quarkus behind the scenes. So if you ever wanted to write an operator, a Kubernetes operator, there is now examples of that, and we've built in Red Hat our own Kafka service that actually uses, I think, like 2 or 3 operators that are implemented with this Quarkus Java operator thing. Something we'll probably get a look into in a future episode, but if you want to try it, then there is now a place where you can try that out. Let me just put that in here in the chat for those who want to see it. And then I think, Steve, you wanted to talk about the World Tour?
Oh, yeah, just a little. So we've done 10, I think, we're just scratching the surface, more to come. We're getting requests in from companies who'd like us to come along and talk about Quarkus, which is cool, but also universities as well and other groups. So if anybody's listening thinks that Quarkus should come and pay a visit at their university, then reach out and let us know. It's worldtour@quarkus.io. The other thing we're doing, because we know we're trying to get the message out to people, is to actually do a more sort of structured newsletter. So you can obviously come to quarkus.io and see newsletter pages, but we're actually going to ask you to sign up if you're interested. And at some point soon, we'll start doing a real sort of email newsletter. If you want to sign up, then all you have to do is go to quarkus.io website and just scroll up slightly and you'll see all the details for signing up. That's it.
Cool. So where's the next World Tour, by the way?
Oh, okay. Hold a second.
If you don't remember, that's if you don't remember.
No. Hold. Just hold on a second, because I live in a spreadsheet.
Oh.
Yeah, I live in a spreadsheet. And the next one is what day is it? The 10th. The next one is tomorrow. It is Paris tomorrow. Paris. And then Saxony Jug a couple of days after that.
Very nice. Okay. Well, let's go. So I think that covers the news. I'm very excited for the next thing we're going into. So, yes, we're going to talk about continuous testing. And the great thing about continuous testing is, besides being awesome, is that it has a funny backstory. And Benjamin Thomas, who's here. So you all guys know Stuart. He's done all the technical stuff before. But Benjamin, can you give a quick introduction on who you are, where you're from, and I hear you don't do Java.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Definitely not a Java developer, but curious about it. Ruby is my main language, I would say. And I would qualify myself as a curious programmer. So I'm sort of evaluating, what's out there in 2021. And yeah, I've been dabbling with Java for about a year. I had a look at, the most popular framework, I would think, Spring Boot. Really didn't like it. I gave it a good go and just couldn't get in the flow. And so I tried Quarkus because I saw that little icon in IntelliJ. I say, oh yeah, let's try it out.
Oh,
And yeah, and I was like, oh, that's nice. That's quite a different experience. The initial live reload was the thing that triggered my interest. I tried the other competitor to Quarkus. I don't remember the name, the name of it, but I didn't have that sort of developer, that developer nicety, that enables one to work quickly. So I always thought it was very frustrating to work with Java just because of that waiting. I'm the kind of programmer that has to have really quick feedback. I suppose that I get out of the zone if the feedback's too slow. So I started to play around with Quarkus, and I realized that you've got really fast feedback for implementing dev pages. And then I tried to implement some testing, and I was like back to the slowness. I would say I would call this the slowness, and it's it appeared to me that I was thinking, so if the dev workflow is quick, why wouldn't the test workflow be quick in the same way? So I was like thinking, I'm maybe missing something. There must be something stupid I'm not comprehending. I looked at the docs, couldn't find anything. So I was like, gotta dig in further. And so I've put a message on the mailing list, and I suppose that's where the your work is coming from.
Yeah, no, that mailing post. I think it was like 3 months ago or something. 3.5 months ago. I don't know. I think it went quiet for a day or two, and then suddenly Stuart answered, followed on it, and I'll let him tell what he did from it. But I just feel that email just kept coming back again. That there was someone who came from the non-Java world and said, "Hey, all the other stuff is good, but the testing doesn't seem to be there." And the one you were talking about mainly was that the test wasn't run automatically, and therefore you're used to from JavaScript and from Ruby that you can do this continuous testing. And it just
my main thing was the quick feedback. I was like, oh, come on, give me the quick feedback.
Because before you sent that email, I thought our testing was great. Like, you can just run them from the IDE and
and I guess that's what's interesting, to just sort of see what's available in different technologies. I think maybe Java programmers have been tolerating slow feedback. Because they're used to it, it's not a problem. But when you come from another programming language, I mean, I'm saying Ruby is my main stack, but I've been working with Go as well, Golang, and the feedback is like instantaneous. So it's not. I knew it wasn't a compiling thing, and I don't know how it works under the hood, but you've implemented like a sort of power user tool for the programmer, which is great.
Yeah, it's definitely what you get used to, because before that email, it never even occurred to me that we could do this in Java. And then once I saw that, I was like, we do actually have all the pieces that we need, except for an actual test runner. Like, we've got support for the reloading, we've got support for the compiling, we had almost all the pieces there ready to go, except for the test runner. They just needed to be assembled.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got the proof of concepts working and saw how much nicer it was, I got very excited by it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've played with it this weekend, and it's I think it's very, very good. It's really, really good. So it's great work, very, very good work. I don't know what motivated you to implement the fast dev feedback cycle, but I think it's a great story. It's a great story for programmers. Because at the end of the day, as they say, time is money, and how much time you got to wait. I mean, it just accumulates. Well, apart from that, and then there's this kind of programmer you are, and I don't know if it's some kind of programmers can just sort of code, and then they're going to say, oh, now I'm going to run my program and stuff is broken, but I'm not used to that. So I definitely sort of appreciate having this possibility. So when I played with it this weekend, it was just great. I tested a lot of stuff, could really test implementing step by step. TDD, which is always like something I'm struggling with. I think it's very, very hard to do TDD properly. With this tool, you can just really do it, and that's great.
So this was, I think, the funny part was actually over the year, like generally we got the feedback. A dev mode gives just the basic dev mode where we can restart quickly. Gives a big difference compared to other, as you said, other Java frameworks. But I remember there was also another guy who actually told me, why would I use dev mode? Dev mode doesn't run my tests, so therefore he wanted to do the traditional Java testing one.
Oh yeah.
So that was why we were like, okay, so we got something here, but we don't need to improve the testing right now because it's fine. But then. Now, when we have the continuous testing, which I think Stuart should show here just 2 seconds so people can understand what it actually is, and Thomas asking for he wants to see a demo. I actually feel like we've reached a point where yes, now you can both have the fast feedback and just kind of play around and have fun, but at the same time you can also have the test to keep you honest and be like, oh, I'm breaking stuff now, or I'm still green. So
it's very. As a Quarkus newbie, and also the Java EE architecture newbie, it's great because you can just sort of the fact that you don't really know a concept, you think you understand it, and you just put that test line, and you see it fail or pass instantaneously. I think it's fantastic.
So Stuart, we are 30 minutes in. We haven't seen code yet. Can you maybe give an intro and then people can see the?
I can. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, so what I've got here is basically our getting started quick start, but I've made a few slight changes to it, like as well as the standard greeting resource. I've added a farewell resource and an extra test, just so we've got more than one test. And now to use continuous testing, all I need to do is run nvn Quarkus dev, the same way I would normally launch dev mode. And we'll see that with Alpha 2 that it's a little bit different, because once it's started, now down the bottom of the screen, you get this little You get this little status message here that just always sits at the bottom saying that the tests are paused and you can press R to resume. So if you don't want to use continuous testing, just don't press anything and things will work the same. If I press R, we'll see that it just runs the tests down the bottom here and all tests are passed. I can press R to run them again, and so they run in very quickly, 600 milliseconds. And yeah, so I can see here that my application is working properly. So now what I can do is if I go to my test, and I'm going to change the way the greeting works so that I'll now want it to say hello world. So if I save that file, I can see that my test is now failing. And even though I've got 4 tests in total, it only ran the 2, which is the 2 that are in this class, because it knows which files have been modified and which files needed to be tested. So in this case, it's very easy because I've modified the test itself, but it also tracks which parts of your application code need to be modified, have been modified, and which parts of the application code each test is touching. So that if I modify, now if I go here and modify my greeting resource and make it return hello world, it will still only run the 2 tests. It won't run the full test suite again, because it knows that this farewell test doesn't touch the greeting resource. And so yeah, it's very sort of smart in how it runs its tests, and it tries to just run the minimum amount of tests as possible. So there's also a few more options here. And if you press H, you can see that there's a few different keyboard commands I can issue. So I don't have, if I make my test break again, I can press F just to rerun the failed test. So if I've got like a flaky test, or if I want to attach my debugger and sort of try and figure out what's wrong with my broken one, I can just press F to rerun the failed one. There's also a mode called broken only, where we only run the failing tests. So where this is useful is that you might have some code that lots of tests touch, but you're only really interested in the one that's failing at the moment. So if you just want to get a really quick dev experience for that one test, you can set it to broken only mode. And then when you make changes, it will only run that one test that was already failing. So you can just sort of work on getting that fixed.
Okay, and
now they're passed, and now if I make changes, nothing happens because it's still in broken only mode, no test to run. But if I then add a new test, it will run this new test because it doesn't know if this is working or not.
Cool.
It won't do anything now. So yeah, it's run that one, it's passed, and we're back to everything passing.
So we got a question from Tokyo Walker saying, how does it know that the farewell test does not touch the green test? Is it via the test?
So what I do at startup is when I'm setting up the test runner, I actually instrument all the application classes that are under testing so that I can track which methods are called on which class. And then as I'm running the tests, I just basically record every method that's called during the life cycle, the execution of this test, and sort of store it. So then I end up with this sort of data structure that it's a map of the test to what classes it's actually touched. So then if any of those classes are modified, you can, you know that you need to rerun those tests.
Very cool.
So like it's not 100%, it won't work 100% of the time, but it's like, in the real world, it'll work like 99% of the time. Like if you had a test that sort of picked a random number and did a different thing, like did completely different code paths based on the random number, then yeah, that won't pick that up. Or if something's racy but in the real world, it's pretty good.
How often do you reset that cast? Because like here, you're just changing like method bodies, so it doesn't require a restart. But if you added like extra additional methods, then I guess things becomes out of whack. Do you just run the whole thing from the beginning, or?
No, it's updated incrementally. So every time, so when you like change some code and it runs those tests, it just updates that data structure in memory. And the one downside of this approach is that when you start, you have to run all the tests to sort of build that initial data structure. Eventually, I want to be able to cache that somehow so that you can even incrementally cache that between runs and just check the timestamps of the modified files. So on startup, it might only run the tests that have been changed since the last time it was run. So even if you like shut this down, made some changes, and then started it again, it would be able to just run the relevant tests. But I don't think that'll make it into 2.0.
Yeah.
It might. We'll see.
Because I know one of the discussions we had on the mailing list was this thing about like, should we run this automatically or not? And we were very like, both you and I was like, we have to have it. It has to be easily there by default, because otherwise this will just be a feature no one discovers, right? So I think we found a very good balance here where you're not forced into running all the full test suite, but it's super easy to do. So I think that's great.
Yeah, so you can actually like change the configuration for how it starts. So if you go quarkus.dev.continue testing enabled, then on startup, it'll just start running the test straight away. So if you like always want to use continuous testing, you can just enable it. and have it just work on startup, or you can disable it completely and it just won't show up in your console, and you can completely ignore it if you want.
Okay,
there's lots of. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so we just got 3 questions that I just want to cover here. So one is, does this work from Rene Grubb? Does this work across Maven, Gradle, models in multi-module projects?
Yeah, at the moment it only runs tests in the main, in the same module as the application itself. I am planning on sort of making it be able to run tests in different modules, but I need to have a think about how exactly that should work. And we probably need a bit of user feedback on what people actually want there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've just sort of done the I'm starting with the most sort of simple case, and then if we want to support more complex structures, we definitely can. But it's just a matter of figuring out what we should support and how we do it.
So Benjamin, how does this work from like your experience in Ruby and JavaScript? Like,
JavaScript, I wasn't using that kind of technology apart from the front-end framework kind of viewpoint. In the Ruby world, there was this sort of file detection tool, whereas when the file would change, well, I don't remember if it was based on the get status, because if you base yourself on get status, you can find which files changed, and the test would run again. That's kind of a tool I knew about, which I didn't use that much, because for me the main thing was the fast feedback. So in Ruby, if you run a test, it's instant. There's no startup time. There's no equivalent to the JVM startup time. But but if you use any front-end technologies like Angular or even the React stuff, you just launch your server, and it's sort of auto refreshes.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, I was mainly interested in the fast feedback. I didn't. If it could have been a sort of preloaded environment, which is what's happening in the Rails world, but your solution was a continuous testing tool, which I think is it's a different solution to the same problem, but I feel it's a very interesting tool.
You got more than you asked for, basically. It's good.
I played with it this weekend, and on the mailing list, some people were sort of having arguments about, oh, it's got to be absolutely integrated in the IDE, because obviously Java has a really nice IDE, but from my point of view, of course, it's an alpha release, but it's already very good. If you, because I could suggest a specific workflow. If you, Stuart, could I just propose to you a workflow maybe you didn't think about?
Sure.
So you see, you've got your tool window at the bottom. But actually, if you kind of think about it like of a split screen, you would have your code on the left and your test running on the right. So if you click on the gear icon, if you click on the gear icon of you stay in IntelliJ actually.
So you want
IntelliJ is in full screen, yeah. So you're going to move it to the top right.
Top right. Is that? Or didn't you want
it
left?
Top.
Do you want it
right
left top?
Right top.
Right top, sorry. That's right. And so you want to close your file navigation, and there's you want to close it completely, like with Alt-1. And so if you adhere to sort of 80 characters or maybe 100 characters columns, you've got like good enough space if your screen is big enough. Obviously, your screen may be a little bit small for the
this is only
podcast.
Only my laptop.
if you have this workflow, you just have to know the good shortcuts, because I took like 10 minutes to find it, and it's not obvious. So it's Alt F12 for you to switch back to the test runner, and then that allows you to just pause the test execution or rerun or view the results. And then to switch back to your code, you actually have to press Escape. So you've got two shortcuts: Escape, Alt F12, Escape, Alt F12. So for me, I thought that was a great experience. You don't need anything else.
Yeah, and there was I remember there were people saying the IDE, and there was actually also when we posted the video, like a few weeks back, it was like, I want that in the IDE, and I was like, the thing with this here, I think we could have it at some point. Like we talked about having an API that IDEs can work on.
No, sure, yeah.
But the thing with this is this works in any IDE, IntelliJ.
Oh yeah.
The Eclipse and the whole stuff.
Yeah.
But that is a cool point about the shortcut, that you can just change to the terminal, type the commands and change back without ever going to the mouse.
So you do Alt F12 twice to hide the test runner. So if you need the full screen, say Alt F12, Alt F12. You bring it back with Alt F12, so you are focused on the test runner, and then you press Escape if you want to switch back to your code. So I thought that was great. It's not obvious straight away, but
well, you can with this you can kind of tweak it into almost anything.
Yeah, it's just a few shortcuts to know, and then you can I thought it was pretty nice because obviously the fact that it's an alpha release, I had a few little bugs here and there when you rename test methods. Also, at one point, I had just too many failing tests. I just didn't know what was going on. So, I thought it was really nice to just pause the test. So in that kind of workflow, I'm very keyboard driven. So I say Alt F12, P for pause, Alt F12, I hide it, and then I can sort of bring back the normal testing windows of IntelliJ. So I can focus on the test directory and click Control Shift F10 or whatever. So you've got the best of both worlds, basically.
Very nice.
Because we also have support for this in the dev console. So you can see the results in your browser. Yeah. And this is still a bit of a work in progress, but if I save that, if you're more of a browser sort of person, you can just immediately see the results in there. And you can also do a lot of the same stuff you do from the keyboard, like rerun them from pause. And so something I haven't shown yet is that by default, we don't actually display the test output, because I didn't want to sort of make a big mess in the console and have it all interleave by default. But if you press O, then you get all the test output in the console if you really want to see what's going on.
Yeah, I must say I like the terminal, I like the IDE and the web browser, and it justifies the reason for I bought a big screen. I see that Sebastian is making fun of me because he says it only works on my screen, because I have a very wide one. It's like 3 screens wide. This is good. This is reason for having a big wide monitor. We actually got a few other questions. Thomas first here. Thomas says, will this work, for example, adding a HTTP response filter? Not sure what you think about that.
That's one of the things that can potentially break it. If you add something that sort of affects the whole application, then you might need to press R to rerun all your tests. Like if you say
it doesn't detect. So what? Oh, sorry. Why does this affect it?
Because if you have, say, some sort of filter that affects every HTTP request, it basically filters are kind of special. So if you have like a normal REST endpoint and you've got that test targeted at that REST endpoint, if you just add another new random class, you know that that new class won't get called unless you change one of your existing classes to call it. Unless the test is sort of broken, but if they're broken, we run them all the time anyway. Whereas if you add a filter that kind of starts to intercept, or an interceptor, well, not so much an interceptor because it would need additional changes. But like if you add a filter in the middle, you can affect that flow without modifying any existing class. So that's one of those situations I talked about where it can get confused. But even then, we could probably add support for, we could probably make that smarter as well by detecting those cases and just knowing to rerun everything. But in practice, I don't think it will really be an issue. It's just one of those things you need to be aware of and just rerun them all.
Yeah. And there will be special cases. It's just like any other kind of testing, like not everything will fit everything, but
I would say with those kind of tools, you're kind of used to that sometimes stuff breaks and you have to restart. It happens all the time with the Angular CLI tool. At some point stuff changes and you're like, oh, come on, I'm just restarting the server. So of course, if it would be like 100% perfect, that would be better. But if it saves you so much time,
but you don't even need to restart. You just need to press R. It'll rerun. So you not restarting the JVM.
Yeah, sure. So it's just a shortcut away if you're in doubt that something's funny going on. That's not much of a problem, I would say.
And then Tokyo asks, can it run in continuous and multiple tests in parallel?
No, not at the moment, because I'm doing that tracing thing where I check which tests are affected by which classes. If I was running 2 tests at once, it would get confused because it wouldn't know which test was touching which class. It might be possible. I've got a few ideas about how I can get around that, but it's a lot more complicated because you need to have some way of associating which thread is working on which request at any given time.
Yeah.
So it's doable. You might lose a little bit of accuracy in terms of it knowing exactly which tests to run for each class that you change.
Yeah.
But I can definitely do it at some point.
Stuart, could I ask a question?
Sure.
I was just curious if you could explain, and I'm sure a lot of people would find it interesting, why you didn't go with the approach of, as I was saying, using a tool like Git status to detect the fact that the file has changed, because what's different about the Quarkus continuous testing tool, from what I know, is that you can have your tests untouched, and if you go and change the class, which is in relation to the test, then the test run will trigger. That's very different from other tools, where the test retrigger because the test files themselves have changed. So I was just curious why you chose this design, which I don't actually understand because I'm not a Java programmer, but I kind of understand the big picture.
Basically, because this is how I would want to work. Like if I've modified some code, I'd want to know if I've broken it or not, if like you've broken something or not. So basically this was just, I didn't really look too much at what other languages did. I just sort of thought, how would I want to work if I was using this day to day? And I thought this was would basically get you the best workflow. Like I think it's gives you confidence that as you're changing code, everything is still working. And it actually makes the normal dev mode feel slow to some extent. Like once you get the times that I've been using this, just like playing around, it just feels so much faster just to write a test than it is to switch back to your browser and refresh the app and see what's happening. I'm kind of sad that I can't actually use this when I'm working on Quarkus.
No, also know for depending, like we already have in Quarkus dev mode, we have all the mechanics for detecting file changes and stuff. And not being depending on Git is a benefit. That we have crazy people who are using, Mercurial or or even just the basic stuff. The first time you create a project, there's no Git information, so therefore they're getting. So there's. I understand. I know the whole. A lot of the Ruby stuff has these tools that are relying on the Git info, which is a very nice and pragmatic way of doing it. But
Oh, but not just Ruby. I think pretty much
Yeah,
the front-end technologies. I think they rely on the same concept. Yeah, conceptually it's much simpler, but yeah. So I understand you had all the pieces together, so you implemented the sort of more correct way of handling it.
yeah. And
we could still do something like that to some extent. Like the detection strategy would be
Yeah.
we could make that pluggable, so you could actually have a mode to just use the Git information and only run the change tests. But I just think that this is better. So like if there's demand for it, we can do it. But
if something goes wrong in the testing tool, so you just have to press R to restart all the tests. That's correct?
yes.
You don't have to rerun the whole Maven command. That would be impossible.
No, you don't have to. You just have to press R, and it'll fully rerun everything and rebuild its metadata map of which classes
are
affected by which change.
Like from my experience with Ruby on Rails, so you've got a sort of dev environment, which is preloaded, and then once code is changed, the preloaded environment would be forked, which is supported only on Linux and Mac OS systems. So that's why Windows programmers don't have a great experience with Rails stack. So the preloaded environment is forked, and that's where and that's what runs. But obviously, if you change the core concept of your application, something related to configuration files, you would have to actually reload the whole environment because your preloaded state was just wrong. So that's what I got used to. When the tool was kind of early, it was pretty rough, and a lot of programmers, sort of got bitten because they forgot the tool was running, the preloading state, and then you would say like, "Why is my code not working?" So I find it interesting that with this continuous testing tool, like if worse comes to worse, you actually just press Alt F12 R and you're good to go. So that's.
It reminds me of a few things here because I know I'm remembering because when I did Ruby, which is many years ago, but yes, they and the same with Python. Others they had this. The way they do it is by forking the environment. We have the benefit of the VM, Java VM. So what Stuart will be doing inside is literally just creating like two isolated environments. One is for the main app that's running in dev mode, and then the other one is for the test one. And that means when you do the restart, it's just we have a bit more power. And it's actually a key thing here. This should be the same whether you're on Linux or OS X or Linux, Mac, or Windows, which definitely is not the same case for
JavaScript. JavaScript, I don't know, but Ruby has roots in Linux and OS X sort of technologies. The Windows support has always been bad because the creator was not interested in Windows. So obviously for Java, it's a different story. I don't think you can even fork a process in Java, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways.
Yeah, you wouldn't really fork the JVM. That's not something you'd want to do. But the only real difference between environments is that not every environment can support this like nice little status thing down the bottom. So in some environments, it's just a normal log message.
Oh,
you need to press enter after each keystroke. But that's just like a limitation of the terminal. So Gradle, if you're using Gradle, it's not quite as nice because I haven't figured out how to actually put the Gradle terminal into raw mode. So it still all works. It's just slightly less nice.
How does this actually work if you run directly from the IDE?
It should work.
Let's do some.
Actually, I'll show this off first before I test that out. Because last time I tested it out, I think it worked. It's not a scenario that I've really been checking for, so anything could happen. But what I've got here is a Hibernate quick start, and this is using dev services. So PostgreSQL has started up a container, and But if I enable continuous testing, we'll see that the first time I run this, it takes like a little bit longer than what you'd expect. And that's because when we use dev services, it actually starts a second container just for testing. So the testing runs against an isolated database by default. So you're you playing around in dev mode can't break the tests, and the tests don't interfere with you actually running the application. And that is only started once. So now if I rerun it, it starts really quickly. Like it'll run it in 600 milliseconds. So I just thought I'd point that out, is that there's actually like really good dev services integration with this as well. And so that your database is completely isolated from the one that you're developing on.
And for those who might not, dev service is something that came in 1.13, or was it 1.11? I forgot where we got it in.
12? I'm not sure, to be honest. Maybe 1.11? 1.12? Might be
1.12.
I don't know.
Yeah. So the basic here is that if you haven't set up your connection for databases, or well, for now it's databases, then you will start a container that we can run a test against. And the nice thing is that just fits with this model. Like if you don't set anything up, but if your code is saying I need a Postgres or I need a entity, or it will just kind of work. And down the line, we plan to add stuff like Kafka and other services in the same way. So you get this kind of reproducible test environment without having to do anything. So that's pretty nice.
All right, so let's see.
By the way, Steph is being funny, saying running 1 out of 23,000 tests. I'm not sure you had that many tests ever, but how does that work? Like, is there anything for selecting tests or that kind of thing?
Yeah, there is. So the answer to your earlier question is this doesn't work yet when it's running from the IDE. I'll probably be able to make it work. I'll have a look at that tomorrow. It probably just doesn't know where the tests are. I need to figure that out, but that should be fixable. But in terms of selecting the tests, yes, there's lots of configuration options. So if we have a look at, haven't got any documentation for this yet. That is coming fairly soon. But if we have a look at the configuration options, you can set tags to include or exclude. So by default, we'll exclude any test that's tagged as being slow, or you can just limit which sets of tags you want. You can also use patterns. So basically use a regular expression to match the test that you want to run for either include or exclude. You can also choose if you want to run all tests, only at Quarkus test annotated tests, or only tests that aren't Quarkus tests, the ones that don't start Quarkus. So, because the ones that don't start Quarkus will run a little bit faster, potentially. So you might just want to, if you're writing those sort of real unit style tests, you might just want to run them. And so you can select that with this config option. So there is a lot of options for what you can enable. And what I haven't actually managed to make this work yet, but what I was thinking about doing was adding something into this console where you could say press a button and then start and enter like which tests you want it to filter on. So if you're like, oh, I'm working in this package now, you could sort of quickly change that in the console and just limit it that way.
Cool. And what happens if you're using the command, like a command mode app?
That is a good question.
I'm getting you to test. You're doing a test session?
If you're doing a command mode app, you probably want to disable it. So I was thinking, I haven't done this yet, but I was thinking that like if you say install the Pico CLI extension, we'll probably just disable it by default, because if you're doing something where you need to be able to enter input, the continuous testing is going to interfere with that. So like I just don't know if there's any sort of good way of displaying that information.
Now we have the thing is the CLI app is no different than a service long service thing, right? There's tests behind it. You change the code, you want to see the test fail, even though that the main app is not running. But
Yeah.
one thing we've always one of the early features I wanted in that just never got around to do was when you do the rerun, like in hot dev works. Oh, sorry, dev mode works for the CLI. You run it once, and it waits for you to press enter to run it again. Now you have this thing. You could actually do like one of the things that's annoying with the current one is you can't change the input. So you have to
the
parameter.
parameters. Yeah.
So now we have actually you have a UI that can actually ask for input. We could the way I would see it working is that the continuous testing will still run, even though that the main thing has stopped. Not sure if that's
Yeah, we could do that. The other thing is I've got a pull request that is open at the moment where I add NVN Quarkus test, and that just launches continuous testing without launching the dev mode bit. So that might be the best solution for CL apps, where you don't actually run the app itself. You just launch the continuous testing process and use that.
That could be, yeah.
And I think that's actually the best solution there.
Cool. Okay. Do you have anything else more to show, Stuart?
No, I think that's pretty much it for it. Like, I think that's pretty much covered all the features.
You have dev UI, the menu,
dev UI,
selection,
the config, the dev services,
and it does work in Windows now. I think the Alpha 1 didn't.
It does work in I've tested it in Windows.
That's good.
Not unless I've like broken it in the last week or two. It's been like a week since I tested it on Windows, but it was definitely working on Windows. Cool. And as much as possible, it tries to be smart about the console and will fall back to the more basic mode if it can't do this nice little status thing.
Awesome. So for those who are listening, if you have more questions, do them now. And even if you want to tell us that this is a great feature, you want to use it, or like why you wouldn't use it, that'll be awesome.
Where do you want people who have not questions, but people are going to be asking, can you make it do this? Can you make it work? So what do feature requests for continuous testing go to?
Just to open an issue on GitHub. I'd say would be the best approach if you've got a feature request or a problem, because we really want to get as much feedback as possible on this. Like, I really want people to try it out and report any problems and get as much feedback as possible, because I think this is a really cool feature and it just sort of changes the way that you work. And I want as many people as possible.
Yeah, especially if you want to do like the TDD, like the real way, like you start with the test, you implement the minimal amount of code in production in the app mode. Yeah. Okay, you got it running, it's compiling, you just implemented your class. Okay, now you implement the method. Okay, and that kind of feedback is like, if you have to wait like 5-10 seconds each time, it's like, I don't see how you could do that. So you can actually do like TDD, like the real way, like just one step at a time, the minimal amount of code.
Yeah. And this also works with in dev mode. We can when we change the palm or Gradle, it will do the reload. This still works. That true?
Yeah, that's still it'll restart the whole thing, so it'll really test the game.
But that's go ahead.
If I do that caching thing I was talking about, it won't need to rerun them all, so it will just be much more seamless.
But still, it's like this. The thing is, like, I always when I try these features, I can imagine in my head how it works. But when you start using it, you go like, "Whoa!" There's like a whole section I don't have to think about. And like the fact that you did the reload of the palm was a big improvement, like last year when you did it. But together with this, it's just like, oh, like I don't have to relieve. I just start up Quarkus dev mode and off you go, and you just stay there. There's no need to wait for a restart or go out on IDE or anything. It's just there. So it's pretty awesome. No. So we have a quiet. People had a lot of questions when you showed it, but now I guess they're all trying it out now. So That's good.
I think it's probably because every time somebody asks you a question, you went, yes, it does do that.
Yeah, like it can do anything.
Yeah.
So, Benjamin, do you have any other thoughts or?
Yeah, I have probably a final thought. So I know Quarkus is main focus is the microservices. Personally, for my work, I prefer a monolithic type of application because I've just got too many stuff to worry about. So I prefer to keep a sort of general code base. But one thing I realized about Quarkus, which didn't hit me straight away, the concept of the hot reload. What initiates the reload is triggering a web request. So if you implement an API, you initiate an API request. If you use your browser, you initiate an HTTP request with your browser. And at first I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why wouldn't the reload be done via the code? I changed my code. The environment is reloaded. So that was just like a sort of a curious thing I had in the back of my mind. But yeah, I realized this weekend actually that this design has a really interesting side effect when you develop a front end, like let's say with Angular, and a backend API, like if you do both of them together, because you can actually have your a front-end environment which hot reloads. That's something. You change your front end to initiate an API request, which doesn't exist. You implement the API on your backend. You changed like the URL or whatever on the front end, and then so Angular will trigger a refresh from the Quarkus backend API. So basically, you've got from front end to the backend no reloading. I found that to be quite something. So because if you use other technologies, you're always going to have some kind of a reloading, something of some sort. But yeah, I was just like, oh, so I can actually develop from the front end to the back end with actually no reloading. So I thought that was very very interesting. It's a nice side effect of this design. I don't think that was the intent. And so coupled with the testing environment, so you can just, let's say you want to work on both pieces at the same time for whatever reason. So you can actually do it. So there you go.
Yeah, like the hot reload was deliberately done that way because I thought that you want to see a complete, you don't want to be sort of hot reloading all the time while you're working because that's kind of pointless. But when you hit refresh in your browser, you want to know that you've got the most up-to-date code. Whereas if you've got a timer or something that's looking every 1 second or doing polling, if you hit refresh, it's like, oh, it didn't work. Maybe I haven't live reloaded yet. I'll hit refresh again. It's just a.
But that's how the front end tools work. They say, oh, your code has changed. I'm reloading. So the fact that you didn't do that on the back end has a nice, interesting side effect.
No, it has. It actually, like, once you start using it, because it's one of the first questions I always get when you present about it, like, why are we not just doing reload like every 5 seconds? Just, and the thing is, first of all, it's pointless, but it also enables this flow that you're talking about. Not this specific one, but well, it's the same in the IDs. I will say an interesting thing that we had in the last couple of last 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We had people coming from, let's say, traditional non-microservice world of more monolithic within. Which, by the way, you can use Quarkus for this. It's not our it's not like you can make Quarkus as monolithic as you want, but at some point it will be so big that it takes too long to start. But no. So those people, the people who use those, they got annoyed by the reload because they had state in memory, and then when you add something, Quarkus default to restart. So we add in this instrumentation mode. So if you change the method, it doesn't do it, but we had some issues with it, so we turn it off again. You can still do it if you want to. But I think in the last version, you can explicitly control the restart.
So now, as part of that continuous testing thing, you can control whether it's instrumentation or full restart. And I will actually add an option there to just be able to disable it completely. So if you're coding but you don't want it to restart every time, you can just sort of pause the restart entirely.
Yeah, and that means that sorry, good.
What kind of state would you want to keep in memory while you're developing?
So one example, let's say you have something in the front end and it goes in, you set a breakpoint in a method.
Oh, right.
The session state is there. So in Java, you can change the method and actually keep the state. You just
got you.
But with ours, it's kind of complex. But the cool thing is, we think we can maybe fix it. But even if we don't fix it, we have added in the possibility now to you can explicitly turn it off, so you have full control over the
right? Makes sense.
Because I fully agree with you. Just the thing you just described is the thing that when you realize, you start playing, like, whoa, this default flow we have is actually, I'll claim, more productive in most of the cases. But then we do want to enable the full control of, hey, I don't want to have it reloaded unless I really want to, and that kind of thing. But that should be that's an advanced feature of these things. Okay, we got one question here from Rene. Says, do you have any other news about Quarkus 2 and when it will be released? So about when it's going to be released, there is a proposal right now on the wiki. I forgot. Early June was the plan. I think June 5th or something.
I think there was an email about this on the mailing list, literally an hour ago.
Yeah, okay, so that's there. But there's we announced Quarkus 2. We said sometime in June, so we're aiming for early June. Again, that's a plan. Plans can change, but that's the goal. I'm not sure if there's other things there are other things in Quarkus 2. There's the vertex stuff. The one thing that I'm working on or helping with is, which I'm not sure we'll have fully in 2.0, but the basics of it will be there, is the notion of we have this thing called the platform, which is managing all the dependencies of all the different extensions that are in there, and it has this limit from the get-go that if you had an extension that was not part of the platform, you couldn't see it on Code Quarkus or in the tools. So Alexei Lubyansky, we should have him on sometime to talk about this. Like, we now added this feature of being able to have external extensions that the tooling can know about. And George Cascaldi and Andy has been working on getting Code Quarkus and this thing called the registry app up and running, so that anyone who writes an extension, even though that you're not part of the release platform, you will still be able to be located as people can search for your, like, hey, I want to use GSF, which is not something we support, but people can look it up and find it. So that's something I hope will be in 2.0, or at least in some of the early 2Xs. What else do we have here? The Stuart, do you know, there's the updated version of having it reactive, but that's not a new thing.
There's better coroutine support for Kotlin.
Yes, Kotlin, which I think I know that we have a Quarkus Insight plan for that in the next month or so. So yeah, Kotlin 2. That's not Kotlin 2. Kotlin is going to be better supported in Quarkus 2 because of the coroutine setup. Do you know if did he get the whole dev mode stuff fixed? Because that was the two issues there was in Kotlin. Those Kotlin coroutines and that the dev mode didn't fully pick up the changes because it's called .kt and the classes are not in the same folder.
Yeah, I think that was fixed ages ago, wasn't it?
Right. Well, I just saw it discussed last week.
You can use continuous testing with Kotlin as well.
Yeah.
I was
nice.
trying it. I was using it the other day when I was playing with the coroutine stuff, so it was
very nice.
Very nice.
Yeah. So no, I think, and there's a bunch of other stuff I can't remember in my head right now, but the big ones is, dropping Java 11, the Vertex updates, Mutiny updates, the platform improvements, continuous testing is probably the most developer jar thing. The dev services was there before, but it's going to be in a better, even more now. And I think that's it. Well, yeah. Well, I feel it's enough for it. And do remember that we do continue to plan and release continuously. Once the 2.0 comes out in the same fashion. Okay, we are 1 minute over time, and I think we got no other questions. So well, I forgot now to go check what we could do next week, but I know there's something planned for next week. So I think this is it was actually another, I think it's the community member who comparing Quarkus to something else who's gone online and talk about it. So we'll see. So anyway, Benjamin, thanks for sending that email. I'll blame you for the continuous testing that got it kicked off. And Stuart, thank you for implementing it. That was awesome.
Yeah, well done. Great job. Great job.
And I encourage for everyone.
It's been a fun feature to work on.
Yeah, that too. And I encourage everyone, whether you're a user of Java or JavaScript or Ruby, just throw out the crazy ideas. Sometimes right, and then it just kind of comes together. So that's awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll end the stream here.